What the board failed to realize is that the breach wasn't financial, it was existential.
There are moments in life that arrive without warning and without permission. Moments that walk straight into your ordinary Tuesday and rewrite everything. I was 40 minutes from my departure gate, thinking about emails and coffee and my couch back home in Atlanta, when a small hand reached out from behind a pillar and grabbed my sleeve. What happened next would pull me into the most dangerous, most heartbreaking, and most defining experience of my entire life. A 9-year-old boy, 6 men in black suits. A missing Mafia boss, a brother with a smile like a diplomat and a heart like a trap, and a secret hidden inside a USB drive that was powerful enough to bring down an empire and dangerous enough to get us both killed. I did not know in that moment that I was about to make a decision that would change everything. I did not know the boy's name or his father's name or the weight of what he was carrying in his small school uniform pocket. I only knew one thing: he was terrified, and I was the only one who stopped. Everyone else walked past. Stay with me, because what unfolded over the next 72 hours is something I am still processing, even now. Every twist, every threat, every moment I almost walked away and didn't. This is the full, unfiltered truth of what happened the night a child whispered, "Hide me, ma'am," at Incheon International Airport, and the entire terminal went silent. Before we go any further, I want to know where in the world you are watching this from right now. Drop your city, your country, your continent in the comments below. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you are new here, please subscribe to this channel right now, because this story is only the beginning and you do not want to miss what comes next. Now, let's go back to gate 14. I was 40 minutes from my departure gate when it happened. I had just survived 3 days of back-to-back immigration law conferences in Seoul, and my feet were aching inside my heels. My carry-on rolled smoothly behind me as I navigated the gleaming corridors of Incheon Airport, mentally running through my to-do list for when I landed back home in Atlanta. I was thinking about emails, about coffee, about my couch. I was not thinking about danger. Then a small hand grabbed my sleeve from behind a pillar, and everything changed. I turned, startled. A boy stood pressed against the pillar, half hidden in its shadow. He looked about 9 years old, dressed in a crisp school uniform that seemed strange for midnight travel. His shoes were polished, his collar was straight, but his eyes were absolutely terrified. He looked up at me and whispered 4 words in careful, precise English. "Hide me, ma'am, please." My whole body went still. Before I could speak, I heard it, the sharp, rhythmic clicking of hard shoes on marble, fast and coordinated. I looked up. 6 men in matching black suits were cutting through the airport crowd in a tight V formation, heads turning left and right, scanning every face. The boy pressed himself against my side, so hard I felt him shaking through my blazer. Every lawyer instinct I had screamed at me, "You don't know this child. You don't know this situation. Do not get involved." But he was 9 years old and trembling like a leaf in a storm. I made a decision in 3 seconds. I pulled him close, angled my carry-on between us and the men, and kept walking at a steady, calm pace. The suited men swept past within inches of us. Nobody in that busy terminal said a word. Nobody moved. The entire corridor seemed to hold its breath, like the airport itself was afraid. Then one of the men stopped walking. He turned slowly, and his eyes landed directly on me. His hand moved toward his earpiece. My heart slammed against my ribs. I did not run. Running would have confirmed everything. Instead, I turned calmly into the nearest family restroom, pulled the boy inside, and locked the door behind us. I crouched down to his level, keeping my voice low and steady. "What is your name?" I asked. He hesitated. His small hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles pale. Then he took a breath like he was stepping off a ledge. "Seo-jin," he said softly. "My name is Seo-jin Cha." The name hit me like cold water. I had heard that name exactly once, 2 days earlier, in a confidential briefing during the legal conference. It was a side note, almost casual. Cha Hyanil. one of the most powerful and feared criminal figures operating across East Asia, hiding behind a wall of legitimate businesses. His son, Seo-jin, had not been seen publicly in almost 2 years. I stared at the boy in front of me. He stared back, waiting to see what I would do. Then, without a word, he pushed up his left sleeve. A bruise ran across his forearm, wide and dark, shaped unmistakably like a handprint. Someone had grabbed this child hard enough to leave a mark that was still visible days later. My stomach turned. "Those men," I said carefully, "are they your father's men?" Seo-jin shook his head once. "They work for my uncle," he said, "Uncle Hyun-soo." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the restroom shelf. Unknown number. I opened the message. It read, "You picked up something that doesn't belong to you. Put it down." I read it twice. Then I looked at Seo-jin, who was watching my face with those too old, too knowing eyes. I put my phone in my pocket. I did not put him down. I needed information, and I needed it fast. I had one contact in Seoul I trusted completely, Clara Park, a fellow immigration attorney I had worked alongside during 3 international cases. Clara was sharp, careful, and she never panicked. I called her, and she answered on the second ring. I kept it brief. I told her where I was, and I told her the name. Clara went quiet for so long that I pulled the phone from my ear to check the call was still connected. "Amara," she finally said, and her voice was careful in a way that told me she was choosing every single word. "Cha Hyun-il has been missing for 11 days. I felt the floor shift slightly under me. Missing. No police report, no press, nothing. In his world, you don't call the police. She paused. He simply vanished. And his brother, Cha Hyun-soo, the respectable one, the one with the charity dinners and the political connections, has been very quietly moving to take control of everything, including legal guardianship of the boy. I looked at Seo-jin, who was sitting on the closed lid of the toilet, hands still folded in his lap, waiting patiently like a child who had learned very early that adults needed time to catch up. "Clara," I said, "how fast could that guardianship move?" She made a sound I had never heard from her before, something between a laugh and a warning. "Amara, it already moved. Guardianship papers were filed and approved this morning." She paused again. "Filed, processed, and stamped in under 24 hours. That is not legally possible under Korean family court procedure unless someone with enormous power pushed every single door open." The restroom felt smaller suddenly. "Someone did," I said quietly. "Yes," Clara said, "someone did." 24-hour guardianship processing was not just irregular. It was impossible, unless a judge had been paid or pressured or both. I had spent my entire career fighting exactly this kind of paperwork corruption. Fabricated timelines, backdated signatures, decisions that looked clean on the surface and were rotten all the way through. I knew how it worked, and I knew how to fight it. But I had never seen it move this fast. Clara was sending me copies of the filings through an encrypted channel. I stood over the small restroom shelf, reading through document screenshots with the focused attention I usually reserved for courtrooms. The paperwork was real, stamped, signed, formatted correctly. To anyone without my specific training, it would look completely legitimate. But 2 things were wrong. The judge's reference number belonged to a civil division, not a family court division, and the witnessing attorney's bar registration had expired 4 months ago. Paper walls, built to look solid and fall apart under pressure. I was about to tell Clara what I had found when Seo-jin touched my arm. He reached into the breast pocket of his school uniform and produced a small photograph, folded once. He handed it to me without a word. I unfolded it carefully. It showed a man, broad-shouldered, calm-faced, smiling directly at the camera with his arm around Seo-jin's shoulders. The location looked like a private indoor space, nothing identifiable in the background. The man looked tired but alive. He looked like someone who loved his son. I turned the photograph over. Clara had access to metadata tools. I photographed it and sent it to her immediately. Her reply came back in 4 minutes. Photo timestamp, 6 days ago. Hyanil is alive, Amara. Someone is hiding him. Then Seo-jin reached into his other pocket and pressed something into my palm. Small, flat, rectangular. A USB drive. My father told me, Seo-jin said quietly, that if anything ever happened, I should find someone with a foreign passport and kind eyes. He said to give them this. I was not a spy. I was not trained for any of this. I was an immigration attorney from Atlanta with a return flight, a desk covered in unread case files, and absolutely no reason to plug an unknown USB drive into my laptop inside an airport bathroom. I plugged it in anyway. Clara had given me an encrypted reader months ago after a case involving compromised documentation. I connected it carefully, half expecting the thing to be empty or corrupted or a test. It was none of those things. There was one file, a video, 4 minutes and 17 seconds long. I pressed play, keeping the volume low. Cha Hyanil sat in front of a plain wall, speaking directly into the camera with the steady, measured voice of someone who had rehearsed this but meant every word. He looked like his photograph, tired, clear-eyed, deliberate. He spoke in Korean for the first 2 minutes, then switched to English. He named names, not street names or code names, real names, government names, officials who had accepted money, approved documents, and looked the other way for years. He named amounts, dates, and transactions with the precision of someone who had spent a long time making sure he had everything right. Then he looked directly into the camera and said, "If you are watching this, my son found the right person. He is all I have left in this world. Please." I closed the laptop. My hands were completely still. My mind was already running 3 steps ahead, the way it always did when I understood the full shape of a problem. This was not a child running from danger. This was a child completing a mission his father had spent months preparing him for. Every detail, the USB, the photograph, the English, the school uniform that made him look safe and ordinary, had been planned. The restroom door handle turned. Someone was trying to get in. I moved Seo-jin behind me in one smooth motion and stood facing the door. 2 knocks, firm, official, then a voice identifying itself as Airport Child Welfare Services. I had processed enough fraudulent documentation in my career to know that Child Welfare Services did not send officers to airport restrooms at midnight without a prior report, a case number, or a warrant. The terminology was also slightly wrong, a small thing, but I noticed small things. I straightened my blazer. I took one slow breath. Then I unlocked the door and opened it with the full, composed calm of a woman who had cross-examined federal prosecutors and won. 2 men stood outside, large, suited, with the particular stillness of people paid to be intimidating. I spoke first, in Korean that I had been quietly perfecting for 7 years of work in East Asian immigration cases. I told them, clearly and without raising my voice, that I was an international immigration attorney, that this child had expressed credible fear for his physical safety to me directly, that I had photographic evidence of physical harm, and that any attempt to remove him without proper child protection protocol would be documented, reported to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and pursued through every available legal channel. The word, UNHCR, landed between them like something heavy dropped on glass. They exchanged a look, the kind of look that meant neither of them was paid enough for this specific complication. Then the one on the left smiled, slowly, pleasantly. "Of course, Dr. Osei," he said, reading my name from my conference lanyard that I had forgotten I was still wearing. "We apologize for the interruption." They stepped back. I kept my face neutral. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down. A flight notification. My 1:45 a.m. departure. Flight canceled. Technical issue. Technical issue. Right. I checked every platform, every screen, every app. The cancellation was confirmed across all of them, neat and official, as though it had always been planned. My airline's customer service line rang twice and disconnected. This was containment. I had seen it before in cases involving powerful people who needed problems to stay in one place. You don't chase someone. You simply close the exits. I could not fly out. Seo-jin could not stay in an airport indefinitely, and every door I had come through now had a question mark behind it. Clara arrived 40 minutes later, breathless, her coat half-buttoned like she had dressed while running. She found us in a quiet cafe near the international terminal, and we sat across from each other with Seo-jin between us, eating a bowl of noodles with the focused intensity of a child who had not eaten in a very long time. Clara slid a document across the table, without a word. It was an internal court memo. Leaked, she said, by a clerk she had trusted for 6 years. It was dated 2 hours ago. Cha Hyun-soo's legal team had filed a supplementary court order. It authorized what it carefully described as temporary international detainment of associated foreign nationals in connection with the ongoing guardianship matter. I read it twice. They were not just coming for Seo-jin. They were coming for me. I set the document down. I picked up my coffee. I drank it slowly, because I had learned a long time ago that visible panic never helped anyone, and it certainly never helped the frightened child sitting 3 inches away from me eating noodles like they were the most important thing in the world. They were, in that moment. Okay, I said quietly, then we work faster. While Clara worked her phone at the far end of the cafe table, I sat with Seo-jin properly for the first time since the restroom. Not strategically. Not as an attorney assessing a situation, just as a person sitting with a child. I asked him simple things, whether he was warm enough, whether his arm hurt, whether he had slept recently. He answered each question directly, without the evasiveness children sometimes use when they have been coached too heavily. He was remarkably calm, not the numb calm of shock, but the trained calm of someone who had been taught that panic was a choice, and that choosing against it was possible. Your father taught you a lot, I said. Yes, he said. He said I might need to do this alone for a while. He told me what to carry and what to say and who to look for. He paused, turning his noodle bowl slightly on the table. He said to look for someone who didn't look away. I thought about that, about how many people had been in that terminal, about how many had seen a small boy pressed against a pillar and kept walking. He told me about his brother, too, Seo-jin said, more quietly. He said Uncle Hyun-soo had been stealing from the family for a long time. He said he found proof. He said instead of handling it the old way, he wanted to build a proper case. He looked up at me. He said the old way was finished. He said he wanted to be someone I wasn't ashamed of. Something shifted in my chest, quietly but completely. Clara returned to the table, phone pressed to her chest, her face pale. She sat down slowly. Hyun-il's attorney, she said, the one handling his documentation. What about him? He was found unconscious outside his office building an hour ago. He's in hospital. He came himself. I had half expected him to men who believed they had already won often preferred to close things personally. But I was still unprepared for how ordinary Cha Hyun-soo looked when he walked into that cafe. He was polished, slim, well-dressed, with the kind of easy confidence that came from decades of being the most respected person in every room. He looked like a diplomat. He looked like someone's favorite uncle. He was smiling before he even reached our table. He sat down across from me without being invited. He ordered tea with a small, gracious gesture to the waiter. He turned to Seo-jin first, with warm eyes and a voice full of gentle concern. Seo-jin, he said softly in Korean, everyone has been so worried about you. Seo-jin went completely still. Not afraid, I had seen his afraid. This was something different. This was a child closing every door inside himself, one by one. Then Hyun-soo turned to me. His smile did not change. His eyes did not change. And yet something behind them was entirely different from his tone. Dr. Osei, he said pleasantly, in perfect English. I want to thank you for keeping my nephew safe this evening. This has been a very difficult time for our family. He spoke for 3 minutes. Every word was measured, warm, and reasonable. Family privacy, cultural sensitivity, A concerned uncle navigating a painful situation. He was very good. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small card face down on the table. He slid it across to me. I turned it over. It was a personal card, no company name, just a handwritten number. Korean one. An amount that made Clara's breath catch audibly beside me. "For your inconvenience," he said softly, "consider your involvement concluded." I looked at the number for 1 full second. Then I slid the card back across the table. "I'm not inconvenienced, Mr. Cha," I said. "I'm engaged." The warmth behind his eyes disappeared entirely. I made 3 phone calls from the cafe bathroom, one after the other, speaking low and fast. The first was to my senior partner in Atlanta, David Mensah, who had the direct contact of 2 U.S. Embassy officials in Seoul, and the calm, steady reliability of someone who had handled crises in 4 different countries. The second was to a journalist named Myrae Yoon. I had helped her source a whistleblower case 2 years earlier, a case that had advanced her career significantly. She covered organized crime across East Asia with the kind of fearless precision that made powerful people genuinely nervous. She owed me, and she knew it. The third number I dialed came from Seo-jin, who recited it from memory with his eyes closed. It belonged to a woman named Jae-soo Kang, former state prosecutor, quietly removed from her position 4 years ago after pushing too hard on a case connected to a name I now recognized. She had been waiting, Jin told me, for something exactly like this. Each call was under 3 minutes. Each person understood immediately. When I walked back to the cafe table, I was no longer a stranded attorney holding a stranger's child in a foreign airport at 1 in the morning. The pieces around me had shifted. I was now the center of something coordinated, and it was just beginning to move. Jae-soo picked up on the second ring. She did not say hello. Her first words were, "I have Hyeon-il, he's alive, but we have maybe 48 hours before that changes." Jae-soo set up a secure video call 20 minutes later. We used Clara's encrypted laptop, angled away from the cafe's sight lines, volume set to its lowest point. Seo-jin sat beside me with his hands folded and his eyes fixed on the screen. When the connection opened and Cha Hyeon-il appeared on the screen, Seo-jin made one small sound. Not a word, just a single, quiet exhale, the kind that carries everything a person has been holding for too long. Hyeon-il looked thinner than his photograph. There was a healing cut above his left eye, but his posture was straight and his gaze was clear, and when he saw his son's face, something moved across his expression that required no translation in any language. He spoke to me briefly in English. He thanked me in a direct, undecorated way that I respected. Then he switched to Korean for his son. They spoke quietly for about 90 seconds before Jae-soo cut the feed for security reasons. Those 90 seconds cost Jae-soo's operation valuable time, but she allowed them anyway. Before the feed cut, Hyeon-il looked at me one final time. "My brother is not interested in raising my son," he said carefully. "He is interested in what my son is carrying, and what my son has memorized." I kept my face still. "The USB. "There is a second partition," he said. "It is locked. Only Seo-jin has the passphrase." The feed cut. I turned to Seo-jin. He was already nodding, slowly, like he had been expecting this moment since the airport pillar. "I know it," he said quietly. "I have always known it." The second partition required a 12-character passphrase. Seo-jin closed his eyes. He was quiet for a moment, perfectly still, the way children sometimes go still when they are reaching for something important inside themselves. Then he spoke a phrase in Korean, gentle, musical, like the first line of a song. I typed it exactly as he said it. The partition opened. Clara leaned in, and we looked at the folder together. It was not more surveillance footage. It was not photographs or audio recordings. It was a legal brief. Detailed, organized, and formatted with the precision of someone who had studied legal structure carefully without any formal training. Cha Hyeon-il had not just collected evidence. He had built the entire prosecution case himself. Witness statements, Financial transaction records going back 8 years. Money trail documentation showing exactly how funds moved from the family's legitimate businesses into untraceable accounts controlled by Hyun-soo. All of it formatted and ready for submission to an international oversight authority. I sat back and stared at it. Hyun-il had been quietly dismantling his own empire from the inside, document by document, intending to hand himself in, testify against his own operation, and take his brother down at the same time. He was not trying to escape justice. He was trying to deliver it. I had handled some remarkable legal cases in my career. I had never seen anything like this. Then Clara pointed to the final page. One witness statement, complete, detailed, and signed everywhere except the last signature line. The name printed on that line was Oh Sunna, personal secretary to Cha Hyun-soo. She had disappeared 8 months ago. Myrae Yoon had been investigating Oh Sunna's disappearance on her own. She told me this when she arrived at the cafe just before 3 a.m., pulling off a rain-damp jacket and setting her recorder and laptop on the table before she had even fully sat down. She was small, quick-moving, with eyes that absorbed information the way good journalists' eyes always do, constantly, without appearing to. She had been chasing the Sunna story for 6 months, she said. It kept connecting to Hyun-soo, but never cleanly enough for publication. Every time she got close, a source would pull back or a document would become unavailable. Then she told us the part that changed everything. Sunna had not disappeared. She had been moved, relocated to a safe address outside South Korea by Hyun-il himself, after she came to him privately with documentation of Hyun-soo's internal financial theft. Hyun-il had hidden her, kept her safe, and left that signature line deliberately blank, a placeholder, a signal. The case was never incomplete. It was waiting for someone with the right credentials to formally take her statement and seal the chain of evidence. The unsigned line was not a loose end. It was a door left open. I looked at Clara. Clara looked at me. We need to reach her, I said. I have a contact number, Myrae said. She had the focused energy of someone standing at the edge of the largest story of her career, choosing to handle it responsibly anyway. She has been ready for months. Then Myrae turned her laptop to show me a surveillance photograph. Grainy, time-stamped 72 hours ago. A figure standing across the street from a residential building, barely visible in the shadows. Someone had found Sunna's safe address. The next 5 hours moved like a controlled storm. Jisoo coordinated Sunna's emergency relocation from one safe address to another, working through secure channels with 2 contacts I never learned the names of. Myrae filed a short, carefully worded preliminary article, not the full story, just enough to attach Hyun-soo's name to the phrase, questions of irregular guardianship proceedings in the public record. It went live at 4 a.m. Clara and I worked the legal brief in parallel. I dictated. Clara typed at a speed that made her fingers blur. We were preparing a formal submission package, the kind that, once filed across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously, became impossible to suppress in any single one. By 5 a.m., we had the framework. By 5:45, we had the supporting documents aligned. At 6:03, a cease and desist letter arrived electronically at Clara's firm address from a sole legal team I recognized as one of the most expensive in the country. It told us, in 8 paragraphs of sophisticated legal language, to stop everything immediately. I read it once. I set it aside. I kept dictating. 30 minutes later, 2 things happened within 4 minutes of each other. The first, Myrae messaged to say her preliminary article had already been picked up by 2 international outlets. Hyun-soo's name was moving. The second, 2 uniformed airport security officers, real ones, with official badges and correct terminology, approached our table. Someone had filed a formal complaint with airport authorities. The complaint stated that I had abducted a Korean child. They separated us in the professionally courteous way of people who believe the paperwork makes something acceptable. 2 officers stayed with Seo-jin at the table. Two walked me to a side office near the terminal information desk, where a senior official reviewed the complaint on a tablet with a carefully neutral expression. The complaint was official. It was documented. It named me by full name, passport number, and hotel address. It had been filed 45 minutes earlier by an attorney representing Cha Hyun-soo's interests. I watched through the glass partition as Seo-jin sat alone at the cafe table. He did not panic. He did not cry. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, completely straight-backed, staring forward with those calm, prepared eyes. That image carried me through the next 12 minutes. I spoke to the senior official clearly and without emotion. I explained that I was an international immigration attorney. I explained that the child had approached me independently and expressed credible fear. I presented my conference credentials, my bar registration, and the diplomatic inquiry that David had attached to my name from Atlanta, a process that had taken him less than 2 hours and now meant that anything done to me was internationally visible. The official read the diplomatic reference number twice. Then he read it a third time. He handed me back my documents. "Thank you for your patience, Dr. Osei," he said, in the careful tone of someone recalibrating quickly. "You're free to go." I walked back out to Seo-jin. His eyes found mine immediately. Then very quietly he said, "A man sat down next to me while you were inside. He stayed for 2 minutes and then left. He said to tell you," Seo-jin paused, his voice perfectly level. "Drop it, or the next flight you miss will be permanent." I did not sit down. I did not react visibly. I asked Seo-jin exactly what the man had looked like, which direction he walked, and how long ago. Then I walked directly to the nearest airport information desk and requested the location of the security camera covering the cafe seating area during the past 20 minutes. I cited the active diplomatic inquiry reference number and asked for footage review under International Child Safety Protocol. The request was processed in 11 minutes. I sent the footage timestamp, the camera reference, and the diplomatic number to Myrae, Jisoo, and David simultaneously with a single message. "Threat made to minor in public space. Documented. Timestamped. Use it." A direct threat made to a 9-year-old child in a public airport was not a warning. It was evidence, and I had just turned it into a formal piece of the record. I returned to the table and opened my notebook. Then I wrote everything down. From the moment the hand grabbed my sleeve at gate 14 to the message on my phone 3 hours earlier to the threat made to Seo-jin while I was detained. Every event, every name, every timestamp. Written clearly, factually, and in the ordered way that made documents useful in legal proceedings. When I finished, I had 4 pages. I photographed each one and emailed them to 7 people: David, Clara, Myrae, Jisoo, and 3 international legal oversight contacts I had built over 8 years of cross-border casework. Clara touched my arm. "Amara, Jisoo is calling." I picked up. Jisoo's voice was tight. "Hyunil's location may have been compromised. We need to move him. She needs your input on where." I had never made a decision quite like that one. Jisoo walked me through 3 possible options quickly and professionally. Each had vulnerabilities. Each had advantages. This was not my world. I was an attorney, not a field operative. But Jisoo explained that she needed my legal perspective on which location would best support chain of custody documentation if Hyunil was going to surface formally. Because that was what Jisoo told me next. Hyunil wanted to stop running. Not to disappear into some other safe house in some other city. He wanted to surface, to present himself formally to an international legal authority, submit the brief personally, and place himself and his evidence under official protection. Voluntarily, on the record. Jisoo was against it. Too exposed, she said. Too many variables. Myrae said, with characteristic directness, that if it worked, it was the most significant accountability story in this region in a decade. I asked to speak to Hyunil directly. Jisoo connected us without argument. His voice was steadier than I expected. I asked him one question. "Are you doing this because it is right, or because you are exhausted?" Silence, 4 full seconds. Both, he said quietly. Does that remove me from consideration? I thought about Seo-jin, sitting across from me with his hands folded and his father's plan memorized in his bones. I thought about Sana, waiting in a relocated safe house with a signature pen and 8 months of patience. No, I said. That makes you honest, and honest is what this needs. He agreed to surface. Jaisu said she would arrange the contact point. I said I would formally represent him. Clara looked at me from across the table with wide eyes. I had just taken the most significant case of my career inside an airport cafe at 6 in the morning. Hyun-soo's first real mistake came from confidence. Believing that the pressure campaign had worked, the flight cancellation, the bribe, the accusation, the threat to Seo-jin, he decided the situation was nearly resolved. He contacted Yoon directly. He offered her an exclusive interview. His framing was smooth and practiced. A concerned family member trying to protect a vulnerable child from a well-meaning but deeply misguided foreign interference. He was calm, sympathetic, and very careful with his language. He spoke for 22 minutes. Myrae agreed warmly, thanked him twice, and recorded every word. She sent the full audio to me, and Clara within 15 minutes of hanging up. I listened through once with my notebook open. In 22 minutes of careful conversation, Hyun-soo had made 3 factual errors. Small ones, dates that didn't match the filing timeline, a location reference that contradicted his official statement, a name, Sunay's name, that he used in a context that revealed he knew her current whereabouts, despite officially reporting her disappearance months earlier. To a casual listener, none of it would have registered. To a trained attorney building a legal case, each error was a crack in the foundation. And cracks, applied with the right pressure at the right moment, became breaks. I marked each timestamp. I cross-referenced each error against the documentation we already had. Then I looked up at Clara. The third contradiction, I said. He knows where Sana is. He has known for some time, which means the attack on Hyun-il's attorney was not reactive. Clara caught up with me instantly. It was coordinated, she said, from inside. Clara arranged the notarization session through a partner firm in a neutral jurisdiction, a legal mechanism I had used twice before in sensitive cross-border whistleblower cases. It was clean, documented, and internationally recognized. Osuna appeared on screen from a location I was not given. She looked like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had finally reached the place where she could set it down. She spoke for 31 minutes without interruption. Her account was precise, chronological, and devastating. She described Hyun-soo's systematic financial diversion going back 4 years. She named the internal staff he had pressured or paid for silence. She described the process by which legitimate business revenues were redirected into private accounts through a network of sub-companies that existed only on paper. She described the day she brought her documentation to Hyun-il and what he said when he read it. Then she described one thing that was not in any of the documents we already had. She said that Hyun-soo had not begun his plan in response to his brother's investigation. The investigation came second. Hyun-soo had begun his systematic takeover 4 years ago, well before Hyun-il found anything. There was no triggering event, no rivalry that escalated. He had simply looked at everything his brother had and decided, quietly and methodically, that it should be his. The malice was not reactive. It was architectural. Built slowly over years, while Hyun-soo attended charity dinners and smiled at cameras. Sana signed the statement. Then she said, "There is one more person who knows all of this, someone still inside, someone Hyun-soo trusts completely." She paused. "She is very close to that boy right now." The name Sana gave was not Clara. It was Hana, the junior associate Clara had brought to the airport with her, a young woman who had been sitting 3 tables away for the past several hours, laptop open, appearing to work. I had noticed her, registered her as safe, and moved on, which was exactly how it was supposed to work. Clara's expression, when I told her quietly, was something I will not describe in detail. It was the expression of someone who had trusted a person and understood in one moment the full weight of what that trust had allowed. She composed herself in under a minute. That is who Clara was. We did not confront Hannah. I made that decision immediately, and Clara agreed without hesitation. A confronted informant panics, warns their handler, and the operation changes shape in ways we cannot predict. An unaware informant is something different. An unaware informant is a tool we could use. Over the next 90 minutes, we fed Hannah 3 pieces of carefully constructed misinformation. We spoke just loudly enough, made calls within earshot, allowed her to overhear exactly what we needed Hyun-soo to believe. We told her, without telling her, that the case submission had been delayed by a jurisdictional complication, that Jisoo's location plan for Hyunil had collapsed, that I was reconsidering the entire situation. Hannah reported it all. Hyun-soo's team, confident and satisfied, made a tactical decision. They pulled back. 3 of the 6 surveillance positions around the airport stood down. The opening we needed was 30 minutes wide. It was enough. Jisoo moved Hyunil to the contact point in that 30-minute window. She did it with the efficiency of someone who had been preparing this specific sequence for a very long time and had simply been waiting for the right conditions. 2 representatives from an international legal oversight body, contacts David had spent 36 hours quietly coordinating from Atlanta, were already in position. David had not slept. I knew this without asking, because David never slept when a case needed him. The legal brief, complete and signed, was submitted simultaneously across 3 separate jurisdictions at 9:47. The simultaneous filing was deliberate. Filing in one jurisdiction could be challenged, delayed, or suppressed by a well-resourced legal team. Filing in 3 at the same moment meant that any suppression attempt in one location would be contradicted by active proceedings in the other 2. It took 11 minutes from the first submission to the final confirmation. I sat in the airport cafe with Clara and Seo-jin, watching the confirmation receipts arrive one by one on the encrypted laptop. When the 3rd one came through, I set the laptop down. I picked up my coffee. It had gone cold 2 hours ago. Seo-jin was doing homework from his school bag, working through what appeared to be a mathematics problem with careful, focused attention. As though the past 14 hours had been a detour, and now it was time to catch up on the things that mattered. I watched him for a moment. Then my phone showed a notification. Hyun-soo's legal team had filed an emergency injunction at 10:01 a.m. The submission timestamps read 9:47 a.m. They were 14 minutes too late. Myray's full story published at 6 a.m. the following morning. By 9 a.m., it had been picked up by 4 international news outlets. By noon, Cha Hyun-soo's name was appearing alongside words like fraud, criminal conspiracy, and international oversight inquiry in every major Korean news platform. His legal team released a statement. It used the word baseless 9 times. Myray noted this in her follow-up piece with the dry, precise wit that made her one of the best in her field. The fraudulent guardianship order was suspended pending full judicial review. The 2 fake child welfare contractors from the airport were identified within 18 hours. They were traced to a private security firm whose registration documents listed a holding company that connected, through 2 intermediate layers, directly to Hyun-soo. The flight cancellation, my flight, the one that had seemed so permanent and so impossible the night before, was traced to a phone call made from a number registered to that same security firm. Every thread, when pulled, connected to the same weave. Hyunil's attorney, recovering in hospital, provided a formal statement confirming he had been approached and threatened in the weeks before the attack. His statement named the intermediary. The intermediary was connected. The connection was documented. The case was not a single accusation against a powerful man. It was a structure, interlocking, cross-referenced, filed across multiple jurisdictions, and it held. Clara sent me a message at 2 p.m. Korean family court. Different judge, not his judge. She wants to speak to Seo-jin. Judge Park was a small, precise woman who had worked in family court for 22 years. She met Seo-jin in a quiet room provided by the airport's administrative wing. Just the two of them, with me visible through a glass partition. Clara stood beside me. We did not speak. I watched Seo-jin's face for 40 minutes. I watched him be serious and young and sad in equal measure. I watched him speak with the particular careful honesty of a child who had been trained not to exaggerate and had taken that training fully to heart. I watched him pause when something was difficult and continue anyway. He never looked through the glass at me. He did not need to. When they came out, Judge Park stopped in front of me. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I still find difficult to name precisely, somewhere between assessment and recognition. "This child," she said, "does not require a guardian assigned by a court in a fraudulent proceeding. He requires his father, adequate and verified protection, and adults who are not afraid of powerful men." She paused. "He appears to have encountered at least one such adult already." Emergency protective custody of Seo-jin was formally transferred into a verified interim arrangement, away from any jurisdiction connected to Hyun-soo, pending the completion of the full legal proceedings. The order was signed and timestamped at 4:18 p.m. At 4:26 p.m., Cha Hyun-soo was taken in for formal questioning by investigators from a joint oversight team. Clara gripped my arm once, briefly. Then she straightened her coat and went back to her phone. I stood still for a moment. Outside the airport window, Seoul moved on in its ordinary afternoon way, entirely unaware. Hyun-soo did not break quickly. Men who had operated with impunity for a long time rarely do, but the structure around him collapsed with a speed that surprised even me. Within 48 hours of formal questioning, 3 of his senior business partners issued public statements creating distance between themselves and his operations. His primary legal team reduced from 7 attorneys to 2. The judge whose rulings had enabled the fraudulent guardianship paperwork was placed under formal judicial review by the oversight body. Sunay's testimony, once part of a sealed filing, was cleared for partial release. Myrae published the relevant sections. They were republished, translated, and shared in ways that made suppression irrelevant. Hana, Clara's junior associate, was quietly removed from the firm. Clara handled it the way Clara handled everything, directly, without drama, and with full documentation. Jisoo coordinated Hyun-il's formal surrender to the oversight authority, a process that had been built into the brief from the beginning. He submitted himself, his testimony, and his full cooperation. The agreement protecting his son's safety and his own right to testimony was confirmed in writing before a single camera turned on. The reunion happened in a private room inside a secure facility, arranged by Judge Park and supervised by Jisoo. I waited outside the door with Clara. We heard nothing. The door was solid and the room was quiet. We stood in the corridor for several minutes, not speaking, just existing in the particular stillness of a moment after something enormous has finally resolved. The door opened. Hyun-il stepped into the hallway. He looked at me steadily for a moment. Then he said, "I understand you have been here for 3 days. What do I owe you, Dr. Osei?" I looked at him. Then I looked past him to Seo-jin standing just behind his father's arm. "Nothing," I said, "but I think your son has something he'd like to say." Seo-jin stepped forward. He stood in front of me with his hands at his sides and his back straight, the way he had stood since the moment I first saw him, with a kind of dignity that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with what he had been through and chosen not to let break him. He looked up at me and said, very simply and very clearly, "Thank you for hiding me, ma'am." I thought about Gate 14, about the hand on my sleeve and the 6 men in black suits, and the decision I made in 3 seconds between a pillar and the departures board. I thought about the messages and the canceled flight, and the threat made to a 9-year-old child in a public space. I thought about every person who had walked past that pillar without stopping. I crouched down to his level. The way he had found me, looking up, Now we were the same height. You didn't need hiding, Seo-jin, I said. You needed someone to stand still long enough to see you. He nodded once, slowly, as though that confirmed something he had already suspected. I flew home the following morning. The flight was uneventful. My caseload was catastrophic. David left a voicemail that was mostly stunned and partially concerned about liability, which I thought was extremely fair. 3 weeks later, a small package arrived at my Atlanta office. No return address. Inside, wrapped carefully in plain paper, was a ceramic bird, small, smooth, beautifully made, glazed in deep blue-gray. With it was a note card. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, the letters slightly uneven in the way of someone still practicing. So you do not forget, S. I set it on my desk, between my stapler and my coffee mug, and it has been there every morning since. Some cases end in courtrooms, with rulings and gavels and official language. This one ended in an airport corridor in 3 seconds when I decided to stand still. That was never a legal decision. It was a human one. And every day, the small ceramic bird reminds me that those are always the ones that matter most. This story, fictional as it is, carries truths that are very real and worth sitting with long after the last word. The first truth is this: courage is almost never loud. It does not announce itself. It does not come with preparation or permission or a clear sign that the moment has arrived. Courage, most of the time, looks exactly like what Amara did at Gate 14, a quiet decision, made in 3 seconds to not keep walking. The most important choices in life often look small from the outside. They rarely feel heroic in the moment. They just feel like the only decent thing left to do. The second truth is about power and how it protects itself. Hyun-soo did not maintain control through violence alone. He maintained it through paperwork, through speed, through using the systems that were supposed to protect people, courts, attorneys, legal processes, as weapons against the very people those systems were meant to serve. This is how real-world corruption operates, not always dramatically. Often quietly, behind official stamps and process signatures, in the spaces where ordinary people do not think to look. When you understand that, you begin to understand why people like Amara, attorneys, journalists, investigators who know how to read those documents and find the two things that are wrong, matter so deeply. The third truth is about children. Seo-jin was 9 years old and he carried the weight of an empire's secrets in his school uniform pocket. He had been prepared, yes, but preparation does not remove fear, and his fear was real. Children in dangerous situations are rarely passive. They reach out. They look for the person who will not look away. The question this story asks, quietly, underneath all the suspense and the legal strategy and the airport chase, is a simple one. Are you paying attention? Are you the kind of person a frightened child could find? The fourth truth is about legacy. Hyun-il could have run. He had resources, connections, and time. Instead, he chose to dismantle his own world and hand the truth over to people who could use it properly. He did it because his son was watching. He said it himself. He wanted to be someone Seo-jin was not ashamed of. That decision, made quietly in a hidden room, changed everything. Legacy is not built in grand gestures. It is built in the choices we make when we believe no one important is watching. Someone important is always watching. And the final truth is the simplest one of all. Most people walked past that pillar. One person stopped. That is the entire story, reduced to its bones. The world does not change because of systems or structures or powerful interventions alone. It changes because somewhere in a crowded place, one ordinary person makes the decision to stop and stand still long enough to see what is actually in front of them. Be that person. And that is where we leave Dr. Amara Osei. Back in Atlanta, at her desk, with a ceramic bird between her stapler and her coffee mug, and a caseload that will never fully empty, because the world keeps producing people who need someone to stand still. If this story reached you, if any part of it stayed with you, challenged you, or gave you something to think about, I want to hear from you. Drop your honest review in the comments below. What part hit you hardest? What moment surprised you most? What truth from that final chapter are you carrying with you right now? Your thoughts genuinely matter to me, and I read every single comment. Also, before you go anywhere, Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city and your country below. I love seeing how far across this world these stories travel, and it means more than you know. If you are not yet subscribed to this channel, now is the time. Every story here is built with the same care, the same intention, and the same belief that a good story, told well, can shift something in a person. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and stay close. Because the next story is coming, and I promise you, you will not want to miss it. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for watching all the way to the end. That means everything.